Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got some stupidity planned with this thing. This car is a 4-speed and it's a 383 and it runs really well. No complaints. I paid $200 for this engine. Some guy had it and he was saving it to rebuild as an extra, and I brought it home. I pulled it apart. Well, I pulled the valve covers off, the oil pan off, and it's all brand new inside. It's got a Mopar purple cam. It's a HP block for what it's worth. I put a Holley, I think it's a 750 or an 850 on it with an Edelbrock Performer intake. TTI headers. Thing runs great. Well, the problem is I have this, and it's been sitting in my dining room and I can't take it any longer, so the plan today is to put this on the Dart. Now, I'm not inexperienced with tunnel rams. This car actually started out with this tunnel ram that's on it, on the stock engine, and I had two 390 Holley Carbs, and it was alright. It wasn't the greatest. When I had this motor done, I put the tunnel ram on with the 390s, and it ran really well. Then I bought these 600s and rebuilt them, and it was like a different animal. And then I went with the EFI, and it's like a different species altogether. I mean, this thing is ridiculous. There's no hesitation with the tunnel ram, none of that. It's just hit it and go. So I originally bought this tunnel ram because I was going to have it powder coated, you know, in preparation for the EFI. And this tunnel ram had these holes in it for nitrous, and obviously I wasn't going to run nitrous, so I figured I'd get one that didn't have the holes in it. But come to find out that tunnel ram has been ported on the inside. Now, it was either ported a little bit and the casting was really good, or it was ported a lot. So I kept that on there and had that one powder coated. This one, I mean, the openings are a little smaller, not by much, but it should do fine on that 383. You know, we're not going for a ton of horsepower by adding this. It's just the fun factor, and you know, for those of you who are against tunnel rams, they're very streetable. I mean, on this 383, it's a high winding big block. It has no issues with these tunnel rams, and these 600s are really good carbs. I found the 390s were lacking, so to speak, and they're vacuum secondaries. So we're gonna get going on this today. These big block Chryslers, the intake comes off and there's no coolant in them. They're not connected to the valley. There's a separate valley pan. So basically all I have to do is take off that intake and put that one on. Well, the other issue would be I don't want to cut a hole in this hood. This hood has a little bit of issues on the one hinge area, but other than that, there is nothing wrong with it. Now, I have another hood up in the rafters. It's blue and it's pristine, and I don't really want to cut that up. So my solution is this hood. Now, this hood needs some help in the hinge area. I'll have to fix this. And it's got some rust. Most of the rust is in the front here. We can get a better shot of that when I drag it out of here. But it's white, and I don't mind cutting a giant hole in it. So when all is said and done, we'll have this hood on it. It shouldn't take too much to fix these areas. Like I said, there's the screw, the nuts are in the front but not in the rear. and it's got a little damage here where someone tried to shut it, apparently. So yeah, we're gonna cut a giant hole in this. One of the issues you run into when cutting a giant hole for like a tunnel ram or a blower or something is when you open the hood, it kind of comes up first before it tilts. So what you need to do is cut more in the front to compensate for that, to clear the tunnel ram. So when you shut the hood, the hole is usually extended forward more than like would be aesthetically pleasing, but it shouldn't be a big deal. For example, this hood has a fairly small hole in it. I was very meticulous in cutting that out, first for the carbs and then for the EFI. Now it won't shut with the newspaper box on it because I didn't want to have it cut all the way to here to clear it, because sometimes I run it with just the air cleaners. But once I take this off, it clears it no problem, and the hole is nice and symmetrical all the way around. So as you can see, that clears it nicely. I've got plenty of room for the throttle. It clears this side. I mean, it just makes it by, but when it's down, it's actually lower than these are, so there's no interference there whatsoever. So, I mean, I probably could have not trimmed it so much this way, but I think at the time, I think these were out farther and I moved them in. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this out, get the dart in here so I have all the room I need, and we'll move on to the stupidity. So I'm taking the hood off first, and I notice someone had done some superior welding here, the hinge to the hood, and put these screws in. Now when I took this car apart to fix all the rust and replace the firewall and everything, I left the inner fenders. I definitely took the hood and the fenders off. I must have taken the hinges off with the hood. Maybe I separated it. It looks like this weld is cracked all the way down. So I imagine I had the hood off. I'd have to go and look at pictures and stuff, but we'll just undo it and see if it comes off. Always protect the windshield. I keep these cushions around for various things. Alright, let's see if we can get this hood off. Weld the nuts on the inside, and then the rust gets at them. That's how you get blown out holes like on that other hood. Either take the hinge off completely, which I don't want to do because it kind of holds the fender on, everything's lined up. I'm going to have to cut this off. Things always take longer than you think. Hood is off. This side, not so bad. Still has the nuts inside. This side, busted out. This one just fell out, the nut side. There's an extra screw head sticking through. I don't know where that came from. That's where I cut the weld. It's rotted. And then all the rust that fell out of it. So the other hood's worse, but I'll brace it when we get to that. But now I'm invested. Now this has to go back together, so on to pulling the intake. I actually noticed some oil sitting on the valley pan, so I wonder where that's coming from. Just undo the fuel line, everything else can come off with the intake. I'll take the carb off just to save my back. I may reuse this fuel line. It's the same width, but it doesn't come down as far when it's on the tunnel ram, and it's got to be on this side with the linkage. So I have other pieces of fuel line I saved when I had that carbureted setup on the Barracuda, but I need to reuse this brass connector. So let's get the fuel line off, and 8 bolts and it's off. I think that oil was coming from this rear China wall rail. Actually, it looks like it was coming from under the intake. We're gonna find out. Ratchet wrench for the win. These are those, what, 12 or 8, whatever sided bolts. I don't have a socket for them. But this works because it gets down in between here and the intake. And on the bolts. I guess that explains oil leaking. Maybe I didn't RTV these. Doesn't appear that I did. Good thing I'm doing this. I know I knew to put RTV on here. I guess I just didn't do it. That's probably why this oil's on the valley pan. Probably coming through these bolts. It's the idiot who put them on didn't put RTV on it. Okay, that was difficult. Let's see if it'll pop. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, look at all that oil. It's probably burning oil. I have another valley pan set, but they come with gaskets on each. For sometimes you put a gasket on the inside and the outside of the valley pan. That's not how they work from the factory. They didn't have gasket. It was just this metal valley pan. And a lot of times when you put the intake on with the gaskets, you can't get the bolts in because it just moves it up too high. So it's all about what intake you got, who you asked about whether or not to put a gasket on it. I've never had a problem with no gasket until I didn't put RTV in the bolts. This is the first and only valley pan I got that came painted. Don't know why. I'm gonna see if that other valley pan I have is painted or not, because I'll just change it. It's not a big deal. And I don't have to worry about this flaking off and the oil on it. I can take these off and clean them. Alright, wait here. 1214. One valley pan. Let's see if it's painted. It is not. I think I'll use it. It comes with the 4 gaskets. But I think I've used them and I think I've not used them. I think on the Barracuda I used 2 because I needed that to make up that space, but 4 was too many. You know, this says put the gaskets on either side. Use a quick drying adhesive cement and then trim the ports to match the metal gasket. Let's see how well this tunnel ram fits. If I had to guess, there's people screaming to not use them and people screaming to use them. Oh, it's hitting the distributor. That's a new one. I suppose I could pull the cap. Can I turn the distributor like a full to the next cylinder and then move all the plugs over one. So I just Googled distributor rotation, and the first thing I click on, doesn't really matter as long as you have enough room to turn the distributor back and forth. They're talking about when this interferes with the intake. When it's happened to me, I just move each spark plug wire on the cap over one position, which basically moves where the number one cylinder wire is. The distributor doesn't care which wire is where, as long as they're in the correct firing order. Because my vacuum advance is hitting the intake. If I take this cap off, and this is 1, and I rotate the distributor clockwise, so let's pretend the rotor's on 1, I rotate it clockwise, that'll bring 8 down to where 1 is. And then I would just have to move the plug wires counterclockwise 1 over. So, I'm just going to put my finger here where this tower is. And if I turn this clockwise to the next tower, and there it is. Okay, now I just have to basically leapfrog counterclockwise 1 over. Problem solved. Alright, let's see how well this fits. Even just without it tightened, I put a, what is it, 0.02 feeler gauge in there, and it hits the ridge of that valley pan. The little ridges that go around the ports. Come on. Kind of remember this smoking a little on startup. So it was clearly oil pressure coming right up here. I am an idiot. So that's the good news. When you do something stupid, again, like put on a tunnel ramp to a perfectly running engine, but apparently it wasn't perfectly running. Hopefully the plugs will clear themselves up, because getting these plugs out with these TTI giant headers is a pain in the ass. Look how clean that engine is. I don't know if you can see that purple cam. RTV. Okay, now it should fit. Okay, and what do we put on the bolts? Everybody. I like it already. Fixing that hood is gonna suck. Oh, is it illegal to drive without a hood? We might find out. So I think on the Barracuda I did use both gaskets around the valley pan, and I could not get that intake on. I remember fighting with it forever and ever. And I just looked at it, and I don't see gaskets. So I think that is the general consensus, that it's you have to make sure your gas or your manifold fits. If it doesn't, use them to take up that space. So I had to run in the house and get the top plate here, because you have to bolt it to the bottom one, and I didn't want to bolt it just in case I dropped one of these bolts down in the cylinder. That would have been a disaster, and I didn't want to tighten down the intake and all that. So came back, forgot to hit record, but basically we're in the same spot. So at some point this GoPro cut out on me and I was talking to myself, but nothing new there. This front carburetor, the throttle was hitting the manifold, so I had to grind that out. And then I put a thicker gasket on it just to make sure. This one I doubled up the gaskets so they're at the same height, because that's what I had. The scoop, the air cleaners hold these base plates on which bolt to the scoop, so you have to have the air cleaners on, but getting the scoop over these air cleaners is not fun. So I'm going to hook up the choke, hook up the gas line, hook up the throttle. I actually made a throttle for the Barracuda years ago, and I ran it like this for years. It's basically the arm in between them, in between the carbs, and then this piece wasn't long enough, so I took a wrench and drilled some holes and it worked. So we're going to use that. So I'm going to fight with this scoop and try to get it on. Okay, let's finish up this fuel line. Of course, I have my heater hoses in the way. Perfect. Fuel line's hooked up, throttle's hooked up, vacuum lines are hooked up. I actually found another piece of fuel line, bent it, so it's nowhere near any of these tubes here. Hoses. Tired. Hooked up the choke. Since these are vacuum secondaries, the vacuum signal needs to be like evened out, so you have to buy these special cases with the nipples on them so you can connect them. So I'm gonna hook up the battery and fire or crank it. I'm worried about some fuel leaks, so that'll be the first thing I'll be watching for. Alright, let's see what happens. This I don't understand. It's leaking out of this thing here. This, which is just like a plug. I'll dry it off. And it'll start to weep. It building up right there. What is this thing? Anybody know? I don't know. So it's basically done, except for the hood. I was able to fix the fuel line leaks. It's just a matter of lining them up and tightening them when they're lined up. I learned something. This right here is apparently called a Welsh plug, and there's an O-ring gasket inside, and what they do is they crimp the whole rear bowl over it, and the rear one was shooting out a steady stream, very fine, but a steady stream all the way over to the inner fender, and that was new to me. So a little research, and apparently Holley fixed this, and the newer carbs come with a threaded plug, and you can buy new rear bowls, but the new rear bowls don't come with a threaded plug. They still have this Welsh plug. So from what I could tell, that's been at least 2 years since they fixed this, where the new carbs have a threaded plug, but the bowls that they sell to replace the ones that leak are still the ones that can potentially leak. So nice going, Holley, on that one. So I ordered 2 just to be safe, and of course the gold anodized ones are not in stock for like 16 weeks or 20 years, whatever it is. The chrome ones are, but whatever. I just want it to be safe, so I ordered those. It runs good. I had the idle set a little high. I gotta play with the idle mixture screws a little. But these carbs were on the Barracuda, and that's a healthy motor, and this motor's healthy too. So my little trick with the distributor worked, where I just turned it one complete revolution and clockwise and jumped the wires back counterclockwise. So I'm gonna take it for a quick rip and then put it away, and I'll just wait on those rear bowls and then move on to the hood as well. But I am definitely pleased. I don't know about other makes, but the motors on these Mopars are offset to the passenger side, so the tunnel ram's not dead center. But I don't really care. You won't notice it unless you're right up on it. And of course the motor sits a little crooked as well. But that's how it was from the factory. On the Barracuda, you can tell it's offset, but it doesn't look as crooked because I think it's because it's a smaller car. So, yeah, I'm going to take it for a rip.
Yeah. Who's a sucky guide now? Look at that.
I wasn't even paying attention to you.
Sure.
Push it the rest of the way until it hits something. Hit something. Now that is enough room to get the other one. Success. This is how you make a two-car garage into a three-car garage. I had to buy another battery today.
Yeah, because you didn't unplug it when you should have.
Yeah, I didn't unplug it. That's how it is. I still need 2 more batteries. I need a battery sponsor.
Sponsor us, battery, please. What was...
Excuse you. It's sucking the coolant back in from the overflow. I'll tune those carbs. This thing will run really good. This thing's going to do really good burnouts too.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. I know. Because I did one.
Yeah, that tiny one because you popped the clutch.
Still counts, kind of.
It does count. A tail of 2 tunnel rams, right? Which one do you like better?
I still like Fry.
How can you not? Alright, you want to go
There
somewhere?
he is. He's peeking in.
He's peeking in.
Yeah. He's kind of jealous, honestly.
He hasn't been driven in like a month.
He used to be the only tunnel ram in here.
That's true.
But now it's not.
Well, he's got some competition.
Well, I wouldn't say competition.
Yeah, I don't think he has anything to worry about.
Yeah. But he is giving us a side eye. That side tire.
We're gonna take him for a rip, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I got on my shirt. Show him my shirt. Back of my shirt.
Hemmings. Muscle Palooza. I used to have a 64 Nova. I think it was called Crocus Yellow. The Super Sport. 6-cylinder. Automatic. Nice car. I got out of the Chevrolet business though. So we did the brakes on this. Well, we did the master cylinder.
We bled him. We made him bleed.
We bleeded them.
That's not a word.
That the caliper on the passenger side was completely loose, and the caliper on this side only had one bolt in it.
You're a terrible car owner.
I know. And when we bled the brakes, the passenger side, it was like foam that came out. It was weird. But now the pedal's high and it stops like right through the windshield.
That'll be fun.
It will be fun. So this motor is offset to the passenger side and offset at an angle from the front to the rear. The goal is not to get a perfect symmetrical hole or perfect cutout around this. When the hood opens and closes, it comes back a little, so the holes actually has to be farther than this scoop is out in the front. So I took some measurements, and this is what I came up with. And with any luck, that hole is not center, which it is not. So what I'm going to do is, I went an inch larger than the farthest points on that, except for forward, because forward I'm not sure. I'll have to put the hood on and see, because I don't want to cut it 5 inches up and have 3 inches of dead space. So, and what I'll do is I'll round the edges. Now if we look at the Barracuda, it is also offset to the passenger side. The angle front to back isn't as noticeable. It's really not at that much of an angle, I don't think. I originally cut this hole for the 2 carbs that are on the Dart, the 2 Holley 600s, and had to make it bigger for the EFI. I actually had to trim this chrome piece to have these throttle bodies fit, and it just squeaks by these bolt heads, but when you're driving around they're well below it. And on this side, at one time their throttles came out a little farther, I think, but this isn't a big deal. I like having this amount of space with the throttle. I don't want anything getting caught. But I did this hole to be perfectly clear of when I open and close it with these air cleaners. Now with the mailbox scoop, I have to take it off to open the hood, but if I cut it for that, I'd be out to here. Something ridiculous. So the goal isn't a perfectly cut out hole like this one. The goal is just a square hole with rounded edges. Alright, let's get to it. I got the hole cut in the hood. Went fairly easy. Where the hinges mount, I busted out the nut that's welded in here because it was all rusted and corroded and the threads were just horrible. And when I stuck a bolt in it, it would probably rip out anyway. The rears are already gone. This is in pretty sorry shape. So this is what I came up with. I had this flat stock. It was actually just one long piece. I cut it in half. It's perfect length. Drill 2 holes with the drill bit and the step bit. I'm going to put 2 bolts in. I'm going to weld these nuts to the one side, and then I'll put them in the hood. So what I'll do is I'll cut an access hole in the back here that's big enough to slide that piece in with the nuts welded to it, and the nuts will be on the top side, and then that piece will just be in here free to do whatever it wants to do. It'll give me a little bit of adjustment, even though this hole's, you know, just basically small, but it'll give me some more adjustment, and I don't have to worry about welding it in here and getting it wrong, and then the hood doesn't fit or the hinges don't line up. So I'll weld those nuts on, cut this hole, slide them in, and maybe try to put the hood on myself. We'll see what happens. All welded up. I did some shitty tack welds. They're still hot, but it's on. They're not going anywhere. I didn't adjust the welder or the gas. I haven't used it in I don't know how long. I did put new wire in it. That's about it. But that'll work. The old ones worked for 60 years. That'll make it that plus some. I was going to tack weld this inner structure down, but there's still rust under here, and it's just rusty and paint, and if anything, I would put some screws here on the ends. So I realized the error of my ways. If I try to put this hood on and I take these bolts out, the metal piece I made is just going to slide down inside here, or worse, somewhere else. So I just put a self-tapper in on each side to hold it there, and I was able to shove it through this rust hole on this side, and on this side I just extended that round hole that was on the end. So I'm going to attempt to put this hood on myself. I have to put it on once and then try to close it and see if I need to make that hole bigger. So this should be fun. I want to throw those cushions away, but for some reason I just keep finding a use for them, so I keep them around. Alright, attempt number 1. Who needs friends when you have couch cushions, a towel, and a broom handle? I'm guessing I'll have to round it off in the back and extend it in the front. I hate to say it, but I'm correct. So I can probably use tin snips, unless there's a... Well, there is some structure under there, but... I might be able to clear it. The front might clear. This might be the only time I put this on. I could probably trim that without taking it off. Close. clear. That's all I had to cut, is that little curve in the back. It lines up in the front. This side of the hood is bent down here, so it's actually perfect. This side, this is bent out a little, this edge, but this line's right up. So that's a win, because my goal was to cut this opening big enough where I wouldn't have to take the hood off a second time if I got lucky. I wanted enough room to clear the electric chokes and the throttle. Always want tons of room with the throttle. And when I lift this up, and that's a nice healthy, 1.5 inches. And in the back, that's acceptable. Gets a little close on this side, but I'm not worried about it. Once it's down, it's fine. Yeah, that's a win. That was my goal. Not be perfect. I exceeded that. And the hood is shitty white enough to match the shitty white and the cowl that I replaced that is not exactly white. This rust keeps flaking off, and the rust in the hood is bouncing around. So I was able to locate an extra piece of hood trim, and I have some trim clips that were not made for this hood. The original ones they're kind of squared off, but they have like an angle at the top or the bottom or whichever one. I don't have any of these. You can make them. I've made them. I think I made them for the back trim on this, on the quarter trim. But these should work. And I have nuts to match. Plus I have an extra hood latch, which I cleaned up and doused with some WD. It works. I'll find some bolts. Plus I have an extra hood emblem. It doesn't have the lower pin. The hood has a fastener in the lower hole, but I doubt it would hold, so we'll see what we can do. I think I RTV'd the other one on. Same as with the letters. I used fasteners on the pins that stuck through, and I just filled them with RTV and smothered it, like so. And it looks like I used those same fasteners on the front trim. So we might be in business. So I moved the one clip from here to here. You can't reach this side with a nut or anything, or a wrench or anything, because that's the side this pin is on, and it just barely grabs it. It's really flimsy and rusty, but it'll have some kind of mechanical hold. I clean this up with a wire wheel. I'll add some black RTV. This is the same exact thing I did on the other hood, and it didn't fly off and hit me in the face or anything, so we're gonna try it again. Now I cleaned up the back of this emblem. I like how it has the forward look emblem there. Chrysler Corporation, part number 2099522. I wonder if there's any of these sitting on any shelves anywhere. Okay. Here we go. Check out those Dodge letters. You don't see that kind of styling anymore. They're kind of raised and at an angle. Too cool. Go to Dodge in your garage. So I got the new fuel bowls today, and of course this is not threaded. It's the old style where this brass plug is put in and then the casing itself is pressed over it, and there's an O-ring behind this brass piece. But I don't know what purpose it serves. I mean, the fuel comes in through here, and then up into here, where the needle and seat are. I mean, is it just so they can machine this and drill this out? It's really a poor design. And I mentioned this before, the new carburetors have a threaded plug here, so it doesn't ever leak, because it's the same as where the fuel comes in. So this is the fuel side, the inside, and there's a copper gasket. There's two of them, one here. And then this is identical, except it doesn't have the accelerator pump, and it has this stupid plug. So I don't know what you're doing, Holley, but you're causing problems for people. I've read online, you know, some people are experiencing the same thing where it shoots out, and they say they're lucky they noticed it, you know, because there's exhaust and heat and gasoline spraying everywhere. At least I might see it, because the carburetors are going to be sticking through the hood. So I got the latch on. I found the bolts. It works fine. I don't have the rubber grommets for there. I pulled them off my other hood, and they're a different size. I looked at these on the original hood, and if you try to take them off, they're just going to get destroyed. So I'm not touching them. There's no point in taking them off if they're going to get ruined. Now this hood had been shut at some point in its life, and the hinges that the car was on obviously didn't want to go. So it got bent here and slightly on the other side, which I'm not fixing. I'm not even going to attempt to fix, because it shuts pretty good. And there it is. This Dodge Emblem is on with RTV and one fastener. And just like I did on the other hood, I filled these letters with RTV, put RTV on the hood, squished them down, wiped it off around them. And then on the underside, I just squirted it inside the hood so it was coming in contact with the RTV from the other side, and then connected the two holes with RTV. I did that for every one of them. So they have a good chance of staying on. I'll pick up those rubber grommets. I think the parts stores have, you know, like generic rubber grommets. But the hood fits pretty good. It's a little tight up there. On this side, it's kind of perfect, except for that bump that you see. But I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm happy with it. It looks good. Looks good from the inside too. So I'll end it here. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, all that nonsense. I'll be back on this car soon. I gotta finish up some interior stuff. I painted some more parts red. Gas tank, fuel gauge doesn't work. Got some things with the dash I gotta figure out. I gotta put that bowl on the carburetor and adjust the air fuel mixture. So plenty to do. Alrighty, thanks for watching. This is how you put 3 cars in a 2 1/4 car garage. These 2 cars are not touching. I'm not sure if that's visible. They are not touching. And I can just close the door. Well worth it.